Good morning and welcome. My name is Olas Karianis, and I'm the field education student at the Unitarian Society of Ridgewood and part of the team that helps bring services to life each Sunday. For over a century, the Unitarian Society of Ridgewood has been gathering in community as a home for liberal faith and free thinking. We pause as we begin our service to acknowledge that we gather on the ancestral lands of the indigenous people of this area, the Lenape. Ours is a faith based on shared promises. We do not demand any particular beliefs about God and the cosmos, but we do believe in the interdependent unity of all existence, and we do believe that healing love is accessible to us all. Here in this community, we celebrate each person, whatever their gender, sexual orientation, age, education, history, race, ethnicity, economic status, physical or mental health, or theology. If this is your first time visiting one of our Sunday services, we are so glad that you found us this morning, and welcome. Please consider staying for our virtual coffee hour. It is a great way to connect with small groups of folks. If you'd like to learn more about us, please fill out the Google form that will be dropped into the chat or email our office at 113cottage@gmail.com. Or visit our website, uuridgewood.org. This morning, we have an important announcement from Jeff Kagan. Jeff?
Hear me? Okay, I'm muted. Good morning, everyone. I wanted to take just 2 minutes to give you an update on where we are with the raffle that we are doing at this point in time to try to cover our stopgap in funding. I got some good news. The good news is that we are 1/4 of the way through, since we have 2 months to do this, and we have hit 1/4 of our tickets. So we have sold, as of this morning, 255 tickets, and that has been done with 36 people participating, and that's really good. However, the bad news is that one person sold 50 tickets to a very generous benefactor who wrote a check for $5,000, who was not a member of the society, who was outside of our organization. Another 5 people have sold another 105 tickets. And so that's averaging 20 tickets per person among 5. But that means that 6 people have done about 60% of the work so far, and that's not going to get us to the finish line. So I just wanted to reiterate that in order to make this work, we need 100 people to average 10 tickets each. If we can do that, we get to the 1,000 and we have our stopgap. The reason we are doing this is that we just don't have the revenues from our traditional sources. We're not doing the auction this year. We don't have the rentals to the facility, and we need to make up an awful lot of money in order to be able to keep alive and keep healthy. So think about, everyone, what you would normally spend, for example, on the service auction, and consider taking that amount and buying the tickets. And if you do that, we fail miserably because we only have half of the amount that we normally would have, since it is a 50-50. So then think about what you also would spend when you host an event, and maybe consider increasing the amount above what you would spend that night at the auction to include what you also spend when you're hosting your event. And now we're getting a little bit closer to where we need to be. Please think about sending out the email that we sent out to everyone that has had some pretty interesting success. I told you that Marcy and I sent it out. Within 10 hours, we had 8 people come back with tickets. We're now up to 35 tickets sold off that one email, and we haven't reached out again to any of these people. I will tell you that the Somerville Plumleys sold 27 tickets doing that, and the Trishkas sold 17 tickets immediately. So this email works. And one of the things I would say to you is, it's really not an imposition on anyone, because You'll be surprised at how many people out of the goodness of their hearts go, yeah, I'll buy a ticket. I'd like to help you out. And if they don't, they simply ignore the email. It's not like you're pressuring someone in their face to have to participate in this. And lastly, what I will say to you is time is really of the essence. And I'll give you an example. I just told you we've sold 35 tickets. Well, we've actually only sold 31 because I'm still waiting for 4 tickets that were sold 2 weeks ago when someone came back to me and said, yes, I'll buy this. But the mail is not very helpful these days. And it takes time for someone to actually follow through and send the check off to us. This is one of those events where we have to collect the funds prior to pulling the raffle tickets at the end of January. We can't have a promise that someone's going to send something in and then pay that money out to the winners in anticipation of a check that might or might not be here. So please, those of you who have participated so far, great. We really appreciate it. You're doing a wonderful job. And those of you that haven't, would you consider please thinking about stepping up to the plate now and participating, reaching out and seeing what you can do about helping us along. We are 1/4 of the way there. I would submit to you the hard work is ahead of us. So thank you all in advance. You all have my email and phone number. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about how to even do the email. I'm more than happy to help you all out. Don't be afraid to reach out to me. And lastly, I just have an apology to everyone. I sort of do this announcement and then I jump off the service because I have a son living in Europe and we have a scheduled Zoom call every Sunday at this time, and it's kind of important to meet with them at this time too. So anyway, thank you all. Any questions, reach out to us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff. And one final reminder, today is the last day of the trans inclusion sessions with Alex Capitan. If you've been with us for those classes, please do join us for this last one. An email went out last evening so you can check for the link. We're so glad you are all here with us this morning.
Good morning. This is Jean Namitz, the Director of Religious Education. You know, around the world, folks light Advent wreaths on the 4 Sundays before Christmas. And this year, we will do the same, and our Advent wreath will stand in as our chalice. Last Sunday was the beginning of Advent, and the first candle symbolizes faith, and we light it with these words. This winter, may faith be stirred in us, not naive commitment, but deep and abiding faith in the power of human care, in community and creation, in the holy that abides in each of us. Our second candle symbolizes hope, and we light this candle with these words. This winter, may hope be kindled in us, not passive optimism, but active and determined hope that shines as a beacon, as a flame in the darkness, warding off despair and lighting the way. Our third candle symbolizes joy, and we light this candle with these words. This winter, may joy be kindled in us, not ignorant happiness, but honest and soulful joy that erupts unexpectedly, ever amidst challenge and sorrow, lightening our hearts with laughter.
Please take a deep breath and listen to this sound as it rings out in the stillness. Imagine that the quiet is the dark and this sound is the light. Focus on how its tone is bright and clear, piercing that silence and bringing something new, something amazing to life. Take a deep breath and listen.
This last week, the United Nations and many others celebrated the International Day of Human Rights. This is a day to recognize that all people all over this world have inherent rights that must be respected by all, i.e., a day that speaks to our Unitarian Universalist hearts. This year's theme was to recover better. Recover better. I love these words. Recover better means that all was not right in the world before this terrible pandemic. It recognizes that recovery, of course, means restoring something that was here before. Our ability to interact with each other, to hug each other, to break bread and worship with each other, without the fear that through that very act, we may spread this terrible disease to those we love most. But to recover better also means that we are called to come out of this crisis better than when we went into it. Far too many of our fellow humans were suffering from a lack of food and shelter. Far too many of our fellow humans were shamed, closeted, and abused for their gender identity or their sexual orientation. Far too many of our fellow humans were incarcerated and killed for their racial identities and country of origin. We have to do more than just recover. We have to recover better, because freedom is still to be won for so many. The first day of Hanukkah this year happened to fall on the same day as the International Day of Human Rights. Hanukkah is in part the celebration of human freedom, of one group of people overcoming the oppression of an empire who forced them into poverty and suppressed their ability to worship their God. Part of Hanukkah is about overcoming hardship. Truly, in this year of 2020, we know the feeling of hardship. In restoring the kingdom, however, the Jewish people had more to overcome than the external forces of empire. They were not merely called to go back to the way things were before empire, but to rule and live better. The celebrated miracle of Hanukkah, about which we will learn today, happens after they overcome external hardship and involves an everlasting flame. As we watch the lights flicker on our Advent wreath, or in our chalices, or on our menorahs at home, let us remember that they are beacons calling us to restore and protect the human rights of all people, calling us to our mission and to the vision of a better world. Let us remember that we are not only working hard to overcome COVID and in this pandemic, but that we are in a larger and longer struggle to ensure that every person can live freely, supported in their full dignity.
Please join us in singing our hymn, Mi Yamalel. We'll sing it first in Hebrew, and the second time through, we'll sing it in English. And all the words will be on your screen. Mi Yamalel Gvurot Yisrael Otam Hen bechol dor yakum hagibor goel ha Please join us. Who can retell the things that befell us? Who can count them? In every age a hero or sage came to our aid. At this time of year in days of yore, Maccabees the temple did restore, and today our people as we dreamed will arise, unite, and be redeemed. Mi amalel gvurot Yisrael otam mimne hen bechel dor yakum hagibor goel ham.
This past Thursday night, Hanukkah began. Like many of the Jewish holidays, Hanukkah has been around a very long time. The incident it commemorates took place in the 2nd century BCE. The story is told in 1 Maccabees, an apocryphal text of the Jewish scriptures, meaning it's not part of the canonical Hebrew scriptures. The story is corroborated in other ancient texts as well, and it begins in a time when the Jews were experiencing acceptance in Judea. They were part of Greek culture and allowed to worship in their own ways. And at that point in time, the temple in Jerusalem was the central focus of worship. And that changed in around 168 BCE. The story begins with the king Antiochus destroying the Jewish people's holiest place. Quote, after subduing Egypt, Antiochus returned in the 143rd year. He went up against Israel and came to Jerusalem with a strong force. He arrogantly entered the sanctuary and took the golden altar, the lampstand for the light, and all its utensils. He took also the table for the bread of the presence, the cups for the drink offerings, the bowls, the golden censers, the curtain, the crowns, and the gold decoration on the front of the temple. He stripped it all off. He took the silver and the gold and the costly vessels. He took also the hidden treasures which he found. Taking them all, he went into his own land. He shed much blood and spoke with great arrogance. Israel mourned deeply in every community. Rulers and elders groaned. Young women and young men became faint. The beauty of the women faded. Every bridegroom took up the lament. She who sat in the bridal chamber was mourning. Even the land trembled for its inhabitants, and all the house of Jacob was clothed with shame. 2 years later, the king sent to the cities of Judah a chief collector of tribute, and he came to Jerusalem with a large force. Deceitfully, he spoke peaceable words to them, and they believed him, but he suddenly fell upon the city, dealt it a severe blow, and destroyed many people of Israel. He plundered the city, burned it with fire, and tore down its houses and its surrounding walls. And then even after the initial destruction, Antiochus and his agents came and further plundered the city, demanding tributes, keeping an armed presence in the area. And then they proceeded to make demands of assimilation. The story goes on. Then the king wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people, and that all should give up their particular customs. Gentiles accepted the command of the king. Many, even from Israel, gladly adopted his religion. They sacrificed to idols and profaned the Sabbath. And the king sent letters to Jerusalem and the cities of Judah. He directed them to follow customs strange to the land, to forbid burnt offerings and sacrifices and drink offerings in the sanctuary, to profane Sabbaths and feasts, to defile the sanctuary and the priests, to build altars and sacred precincts and shrines for idols, to sacrifice swine and unclean animals, and to leave their sons uncircumcised. They were to make themselves abominable by everything unclean and profane, so that they should forget the law and change all the ordinances. And whoever does not obey the command of the king shall die. The king's officers go from town to town, and they discover that not everyone is willing to obey. In one town, they encounter Mattathias and his 5 sons. Mattathias says to the officers, "Even if all the nations that live under the rule of the king obey him and have chosen to obey his commandments, every one of them abandoning the religion of their ancestors, I and my sons and my brothers will continue to live by the covenant of our ancestors. Far be it from us to desert the law and the ordinances. We will not obey the king's words by turning aside from our religion to the right hand or to the left." After Mattathias' speech, a Jew comes forward to make a sacrifice according to the demands of the king, and Mattathias is so incensed, he runs and kills the man on the spot, and then kills the officer of the king. And then after this double murder, Mattathias and his sons flee to the hills, and there they begin a rebellion, eventually growing their army to 6,000. Although Mattathias dies during the time of the rebellion, his son, Judah the Maccabee, leads the army to victory 3 years after a statue of the Greek god Zeus had been erected in the temple. The Maccabees reclaim the temple on the 25th day of Kislev. And one of their first tasks is to clean up the temple. Restored the holy lamp and purified and dedicated the temple in an 8-day celebration. The word Hanukkah derives from the word meaning to dedicate. The story, as it was originally, was a story of religious freedom. This was a battle for the right to practice their religion freely. It was a fight against forced assimilation. But in the 2nd century CE, the Talmudic rabbis created another story around this original historical one. They added a miraculous element, as if a small band of Jews reclaiming the temple from the empire wasn't miraculous enough. And the story they created was one about the oil. The Talmud reads, "What is the reason for Hanukkah? For our rabbis taught, on the 25th of Kislev begin the days of Hanukkah, which are 8, during which lamentation for the dead and fasting are forbidden. For when the Greeks entered the temple, they defiled all the oils in it. And when the Hasmonean dynasty prevailed against and defeated them, the Hasmoneans searched and found only 1 cruse of oil, which possessed the seal of the high priest, but which contained sufficient oil for only 1 day's lighting. Yet a miracle occurred there, and they lit the lamp for 8 days. The following year, these days were appointed a festival." The story became that successful rebels found only enough oil to last 1 day. The eternal flame was meant to stay lit eternally, and it would take time to purify and bless new oil. Having only 1 day's worth was not good enough. They lit the oil that they had, and they hoped. And after a day passed, the light did not go out. Another day passed, and still the oil did not run out. For 8 whole days, the oil and the flame of the holy menorah kept burning brighter with each passing day. This added miracle gave another layer to the story. And since then, Jewish people the world over have lit menorahs as the sun sets to commemorate the miracle of that oil being enough, but also to commemorate the very human miracle of winning freedom and restoring their house of worship.
Each Sunday, we take time to be together in the quiet, to pray, reflect, and breathe. Please join me for that time now. Take a deep breath. Close your eyes if that feels comfortable. Breathe in, breathe out. Settle your feet firmly on the floor. Settle deeply into your seat. Let your arms and hands find a comfortable position. Feel yourself sink into place. Relax your neck. Relax your shoulders. Feel a softness float down your arms and out of your fingertips. Relax your stomach. Relax your back. Feel softness float down your legs and out the tips of your toes. Unclench your jaw. Breathe in. Breathe out. If it feels comfortable to do so, imagine yourself in the darkness. Not a scary darkness, but a comfortable one. Feel it around you. Breathe it in. Breathe it out. Now, imagine in the distance, in the darkness, you see a small flame, a barely perceptible spark. Feel it out there, almost beyond your sight. Breathe it in. Breathe it out. Imagine that flame growing. With each breath you take, imagine that flame getting brighter, bigger. Imagine it lighting other flames. See the sparks as they illuminate all around you, tip after tip of burning flame. Imagine they keep being lit one after another, banishing the darkness. Sit in the glowing light. Feel it around you, warm and glowing. Breathe in the flaming light. Breathe it out. Imagine that you have become the bright red glowing spark. You have become the flame, the brightest light in the darkest night. As you breathe in, imagine your breath feeding your light. Let it shine brightly. As you breathe out, imagine that you are sharing your flame with others. Illumination is all around you. Breathe in, breathe out. With each breath, we can light this world, each of us a miraculous beacon. Breathe in, breathe out. May we never lose sight of the flame within and the flames without. So may it be, and amen.
Good morning. I'm Kristen Blumel, a member of the Board of Trustees. Every Sunday that we gather, we ask for an offering to support the work of this congregation. Our mission at the Unitarian Society of Ridgewood is to grow in mind and spirit, to act with love for justice, and to transform ourselves and the world. This work never stops, and it is a work that must be supported by our time, our talents, and our material support. Thank you for being a part of this community and for bringing your open hearts and open minds along with your helping hands and your generous offerings at this season of gifts and giving. You make this community what it is, and you ensure that the work of this congregation can continue for generations to come. On your screen, you will see the instructions on how to give. Every contribution helps us create a more welcoming and better world for all. Please give generously. The offering will now be given and gratefully received.
Hanukkah linda está aqui, ocho candelas para mim. Hanukkah linda está aqui, ocho candelas para mim. Oh, una candelica, dos candelicas, tres candelicas, cuatro candelicas, cinco candelicas, seis candelicas, siete candelicas, ocho candelas para mí, ocho candelas para mí, ocho candelas para mí. Hanukkah linda está aquí, ocho candelas para mí. Oh, una candelica, dos candelicas, tres candelicas, cuatro candelicas, cinco candelicas, seis candelicas, siete candelicas, ocho candelas para mí, ocho candelas para mí.
Ah, so joyful. Our story today, our time for all ages, is called Just Enough is Plenty. Malka's family lived in a village in Poland. They were poor, but not so poor. They had candles for Sabbath, noisemakers for Purim, and spinning tops for Hanukkah. Mama was busy preparing for tonight, the first of the 8 nights of Hanukkah. She peeled onions and grated potatoes for the latkes, the potato pancakes. Papa was working long hours in his tailor shop so that he could buy more food for the holiday. More potatoes, more onions, more flour, more oil for the first night of Hanukkah. Malka's family always invited many guests, but this year only Aunt Hindi and Uncle Shmuel was coming to visit. Mama patted Malka's shoulder. Don't worry, Malkala. We know how to stretch. We're poor, but not so poor. Now go. Ask Papa if he has a few more coins. I need more eggs for the latkes. Well, she raced into Papa's shop. Mama sent me to buy more eggs. Papa said, more eggs, more this, more that. Soon there will be no kopecks left, not even one for Hanukkah money. Malka stood still in the doorway. No Hanukkah money? Was Papa joking? Malka, don't just stand there. Here, go buy the eggs, Papa said, and quickly. Aunt Hildy and Uncle Shmuel will be here soon. The coin that Papa gave her for the eggs jingled inside her pocket as she ran. Clink, clink. Malka carried the eggs carefully back to the house. She burst into tears when she saw Mama. Papa doesn't even have a kopeck left for us, she wailed. No Hanukkah money. Did Papa say that? Her chin quivered and she couldn't say another word. Mama wiped her hands on her apron and hugged Malka close. Suddenly, there were loud noises at the door, horses whinnying and stomping, and people shouting, Happy Hanukkah! It's them, Mama cried, and the latkes aren't fried yet. She ran to the door to welcome Aunt Hindi and Uncle Shmuel, and then she hurried back into the kitchen to fry latkes. Then Papa came in from the shop, and the whole family gathered around the little brass menorah on the windowsill. Papa picked up the shamash, the special candle at the top of the menorah, and chanted the familiar prayers. Blessed is the God who commanded us to light the Hanukkah candles. Bless is God who worked miracles for our ancestors long ago. When Papa finished the blessings, he used the shamash to light the first candle of the menorah, and the other 7 candle holders were empty, waiting for their turn on the nights to come. Sit down, everyone, Mama said, and she rushed into the kitchen. Malka carried platters of latkes to the table as soon as Mama filled them. Papa came into the kitchen. Is there enough? He whispered to Mama. Just enough, said Mama. When Malka put the last latke on the table, she and Papa and Mama sat down too. There was a knock on the door. Did you invite anyone else? Asked Mama. No, Papa. He got up to see who was there. It was a peddler with a large sack on his back. He had white hair and wore a wrinkled black greatcoat and torn boots. I saw the Hanukkah lights in your window. He spoke softly with his head bowed. Mama stood up and went to the door. Come in. Join us. Just like Abraham and Sarah in the Bible, we always have something for the stranger who knocks on our door. Papa gave Mama a worried look. So did Malka. We can stretch the just enough, Mama whispered to them. We are poor, but not so poor. Mama gave the old man one of her latkes. So did Papa. So did Malka, Aunt Hindi, Uncle Shmuel, and even Malka's brother Zalman. Everyone ate the latkes with applesauce and sour cream. After dinner, the old man reached into this peddler's sack and drew out one book and then another. He read the stories in his soft voice. Some of them made Malka laugh. Others brought tears to her eyes. His stories were about kind people and cruel people, about angels and wonder-working rabbis, about beggars and miracles. Of all the stories, her favorites were the ones about Elijah the prophet, who would come back to earth to help someone who was poor but kind-hearted. One time, Elijah dressed as a horseman, one time as a beggar, one time as a magician. It's as if the whole house were filled with guests, Malka told the peddler, with the people of your stories. Later that night, after Aunt Hindi and Uncle Shmuel left, Papa made a sleeping place for the peddler. He piled straw by the stove. When Malka awoke in the morning, she looked for the old man and saw an empty pile of straw. He was gone. Mama, Papa, Zalman, come quickly, the peddler is gone. She thought of the winter wind pushing him down the street. Oh, I wish he had stayed. Didn't he know, Mama, that we can always make plenty out of just enough? And we don't even know his name. Malka saw the peddler's sack by the door and ran over to it. There's a note, she said. Happy Hanukkah. This will help you. Malka peeked into the sack. She recognized the book on top. It was the old book with the stories about Elijah. Papa turned to the sack He took out one book after the other, big books and little books, old books and new books. About halfway down the sack, Papa lifted 1, 2, 3 bolts of silk and more out of the sack. Purple silk, green silk, dotted silk, silk with stripes and checks and flowers. Papa said to Malka, "What fancy holiday dresses and fine suits I can make now." He took Malka's hand, and Malka took Zalman's hand, and Zalman reached over for Mama. Malka turned to Mama and said, "I'm glad. You're so good at making just enough be plenty." And laughing, they all begin to dance and sing. The end.
Our reading this morning is the poem Hanukkah by Lynn Unger. Come down from the hills. Declare the fighting done. Be bold. Declare victory, even when the temple is wrecked and the tyrants have not retreated, only coiled back like a snake prepared to strike again. Come down. Try to remember a life gentled by daily acts of domestic faith. The pot set to boil, the bed made up, the table set in calm expectation that when the sun sets, we will still be here. Come down and settle. Unlearn the years of hiding. Light fires that can be seen for miles, that dance and spark and warm the frozen marrow. Set lamps in the window. Declare your presence, your loyalties, the truths for which you do not expect to have to die. It would take a miracle, you say, to carve such a solid life out of the shell of fear. I say, you are the stuff from which such miracles are made.
Spin the dreidel like the lights. Everyone stay home tonight. The story is told, the young and the old together. As twilight greets the setting sun, light the candles one by one. Remember the past, traditions that last forever. Come, let's share the joy of Hanukkah. May our friendship grow as the candles glow. Oh, won't you come and share the joy of Hanukkah, and we'll celebrate as only friends can do. Happy Hanukkah, my friend, from me to you. Candlelight or star above, messages of peace and love. Their meaning is clear, we all were put here as brothers. So let's begin with you and me. Let friendship friendship shine eternally. May this holiday enlighten the way for others. Come, let's share the joy of Hanukkah. May our friendship grow as the candles glow. Oh, won't you come and share the joy of Hanukkah? And we're hoping all you're wishing for comes true. Happy Hanukkah, my friend, from me to you. Happy Hanukkah, my friend, from me to you.
The other day, I went to the cardiologist. Everything is totally fine, but I needed to get my heart checked out because I've been feeling the beats of my heart in a new way. And I wanted to make sure that everything was all right, and it is. But I realized, as I'm sure many of you have had occasion to yourselves, how funny it is when we're confronted with the biology of our hearts, when so often we speak of them as the locus of emotion, not as the locus of blood pumping in our bodies. And so as my biological heart needed some attention, I've been thinking a lot about our emotional hearts and how we attend to those. As I stood there waiting to check in, I noticed on the plexiglass that separated me from the receptionist, painted lettering that instructed patients to wear a mask and keep their distance and observe all of the COVID regulations. It's been months now that my family has not been in total lockdown, so I've been in grocery stores a bit, to other doctors, to the pharmacy, and everywhere I've seen paper signs taped up, notices about COVID and how to behave. But this was the first time it really hit me that this has been going on long enough that there are permanent alterations, or at least semi-permanent, more permanent than clip art on computer paper plastered up with Scotch tape. Actual installed glass that wasn't there before, wooden signs beautifully crafted, ambulettes totally repurposed into mobile testing units. I realize it might sound a little bit silly, but it hit me in a visceral way for the first time that it will be at least a year when all is said and done. And they say that habits only take 30 days to form. It's been long enough that folks have been trained to new jobs, money has been invested in physical changes, and whole ways of being have been altered. I realize it's goofy that it took me until 10 months in to get that, of course, that was going to happen. At least here in this area, after a grueling and horrible spring, many, if not most of us, integrated a new truth about our world, and we have acclimatized ourselves, assimilated ourselves into this new way out of necessity. It has not happened all around the country, of course, we know this. But in our area, largely, we have radically changed our lives. We've had to, because cold, hard scientific fact and the consequences of denying it have forced us to. And I've been thinking this Hanukkah about the difference between what we've had to do, make radical changes to behavior, because if we fail to, we risk ourselves and each other, and what the Jewish people faced, other humans threatening them, even on pain of death, to change their beliefs in their gods, to give up their freedom of religion and to pretend to believe in things they didn't. I suppose this hits home this year because we continue to see folks around the country of all religions and demographics And even in some of our own boroughs, I'm looking at you, Staten Island, we see people behaving as if this is what we're happening right now, as if the demand to wear masks or stay apart was a deprivation of freedom, as opposed to the embodiment of a shared belief in mutual caretaking that leads to collective freedom. The Jewish people in the story of 1 Maccabees were being actively oppressed and persecuted. I think a lot about the violation inherent in the destruction of their temple, the holiest of the holies, the heartbreak the people must have felt when they found their sacred objects defiled, and the wellspring inside themselves that they must have accessed when they were being told to abandon the covenant they made with their God and turn towards the Olympians, when others tried to deny their right to express their beliefs through prayer and their sacrifices. What a strain on the emotional and perhaps even biological heart that must have been. Right now, we're being asked to sacrifice in order to make the world safer. And I know it's a strain on the heart, I do. But when a person refuses to listen to the scientific evidence and behave accordingly, I honestly don't know how to interpret that other than that they simply don't care about themselves or about other folks or about the future enough to make these sacrifices. And there are structural problems. I know there should be better support for all of us so that we can follow these more carefully. But ultimately, we're talking about a shared mental belief that loving each other enough to make sacrifices matters, and that making demands of our governments to allow that to be possible matters. Now, look, I know that I'm largely preaching to the choir and that you are all doing the right things, even when it hurts, even when you want to be together with each other and with your families. And I have to tell you, I have been so proud of the deep belief in loving care of each other that leads you and our congregation to be this way, that keeps you strong even when following the advice is so hard. I recognize that it's been a long year in so many ways, and that it's hard to imagine doing this for many more months. And it's weird to imagine doing it when we know there's a vaccine right there. And I realize that right now it probably feels even harder because you want to be frying and eating latkes with your family and lighting the candles and singing the blessings together. This season, it may feel particularly challenging to live according to the demands of the scientific evidence. And yet at the same time, I think this season reminds us of exactly why we do it. This is the season of miracles, right? Of oil lasting 8 days and of a small rebellion ousting an army, of white bearded men in stockings and presents, and of shining stars that lead kings across the world, of a little baby born into poverty, but also into love, of bedraggled trees that somehow still become beautiful when lights and ornaments are strung on them, of candles in the night, of kindness and togetherness that seems to surpass everything else. This is the season when the impossible feels possible. I said a couple of weeks ago, and you may have caught it, that any belief that is demonstrably counterfactual ceases to be a belief and becomes a lie that we tell ourselves. And I stand by that. And yet this is the season of sort of fuzzy ground. Did that bit of oil that only had 1 day's worth really last 8 days? Did a shining star really lead kings? Almost certainly not. You could probably demonstrate why not with a few choice experiments and calculations. But do I believe in Hanukkah and Christmas and the miracles of them? You can bet dollars to donuts I do. I may not believe in the particularities, but I absolutely believe in the metaphor, in the truths behind the facts. There's a hard moment that comes into many children's lives when they internalize that the magic might not be real in the way a child understands real versus imagined. When they question the exact specifics and realize the impossibility of much of it. When they realize that you can't magically make more potato pancakes if you don't have the potatoes and the eggs and the onions to make them with. There can be that moment when the magic feels lost because the magic isn't where we thought it was. It's a moment of growing up, of tears and grieving, and it can cause us to lose hope and become cynical. It's a moment that can break a heart, maybe harden it if we aren't careful. And for some, the road to understanding that there is still truth in magic can be long, but the road is possible. Past the grief, the heart can open and something can deepen, and we can see the magic somewhere else. We see it in people spending a year or more living in ways that pain them just so that we all can be safe. We see it in the lights and the decorations and the determination to find joy and hope in spite of all that's hard. We see it in the Maccabean rebellion, which declared in the face of empire, we will not be cowed and we will hold true to our beliefs. We see it in each tiny flickering Hanukkah candlelight, which cries out in the night, we will live and be ourselves and hold fast to what is sacred and to the magic of life. Sometimes we forget these lessons. We forget that the holidays aren't just about presents, and they aren't even just about seeing family. They're about a love that's bigger than anything, a love that knows sacrifice, a love that knows heartbreak and grieving and loss and still persists in loving, a love with a capital L that is deep and mature and takes work and is all about opening our hearts to stories and metaphors and truths, and opening ourselves to each other and to possibility. The magic is in our determination to live and in our commitment to helping each other. The miracle is that we can create hope and find joy even in the darkest of nights. And it is open-hearted love that animates all this hope and possibility, all the miracles and the magic. Even through the challenge of this strange year, may this season open your heart, bringing you love and letting your love move out into the world in the form of care and hope. So may it be.
Please join us in singing our hymn, Rock of Ages, Let Our Song. Rock of ages, let our song praise your saving power. You amidst the raging foes were our sheltering
If you will not be lighting a menorah tonight in your home, take a moment this evening to offer up thanks for the diversity of this beautiful community, recommitting yourself to being part of a resistance against fear and hatred and prejudice, recommitting yourself to being part of the hope, the magic, and the miracles we create and celebrate. If you will be lighting a menorah in your home, light it knowing that you have a community that loves you deeply, that supports your religious freedom, that needs your vision and your memories, and that is dedicated not only to your survival, but to the thriving of you in all your fullness. Light it, recommitting yourself to being part of the hope, part of the miracles and the magic that we create and we celebrate together. Please join me in the words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish the flame, but may the light of truth, the warmth of love, and the energy of action burn bright in our hearts until we are together again. Thank you for being with us this morning.